Okay, let's start over here. We were able to access the documents directory before we went to break. We were able to command space, paste in the URL that we have in the console here, and go to the documents directory, not caches directory. And we said that documents directory is for saving permanent data on behalf of the user. So anything permanent, that's where you want to save it. For example, we have a lab coming up. In the lab, you'll have photos that you could favorite. So if you favorite a photo, that object will go to the documents directory. You will have a file called, for example, favorites.plist. That favorites.plist is very similar to a database. You could read and write to it. So we'll be able to read new photos to it. You'll be able to remove photos from it. If you do, for example, the bonus part of the lab, you'll be able to delete photos as well. Yes?
Would the favorites be as sensitive as the info?
Yeah, it would be exactly. So as we create it, we'll be able to, in lecture today, when we create our schedules.plist, we'll be able to see it like an info plist. So when we double click on it, we'll see the objects in it. It will affect it as well. Okay? So anything you do to that, like physically, it will affect it. But yeah, for testing purposes, yes, it's nice to look at it, but in real life, that's not what you're doing there. Cool? Okay. And to reiterate, with the file, with the extension we just wrote, here, as far as like iOS goes, we only ever need access to the one and only first index in that documents directory folder. And if it's caches directory, you would simply change documents directory to caches directory, if that's what you want to access. Okay? But now we need to go further. So now if I tell Tiffany, for example, to go into Finder, go into documents, create me a file called schedules.plist, that schedules.plist, she needs to provide that name, or somebody needs to provide that name. So that name will create a helper function very similar to the get documents directory. We'll create a function that gets the documents directory and appends a file name to that documents directory. So now when we want to write to that documents directory, it will be very similar to this. So we'll have access to documents like this, / for example, schedules.plist. Right? So in order to achieve that, we need to provide a file name. Our file name in that case will be schedules.plist. And schedules.plist will get appended to the documents URL. So there's a function called appending path. Right? So we'll append the path to the existing URL, and it returns us the full path to write to the schedules.plist. So that's the second important part of documents, working with documents. Yes, you have the documents directory, but also what are you writing to, right? What file are you writing to? So the file you're writing to, you'll provide the file name, and you could read to the file, you could read to the file, you could retrieve from that file, right? So I could save to the file. I have my favorite photo, I click the save button or the favorite button, it updates my plist. That means I wrote to it. I reload my app. If I'm reading back from it, I'm reading back from that same schedules.plist file. If by accident I write to one file and I try to read from a different file, I won't get data, right? Because it's different files. So be careful there. Okay. Any questions before we continue here? So we'll create a next function. We'll create a function called, what am I calling this? I'll call it path to documents directory. Make it as explicit as possible. So when you're writing your function names, keep in mind that you're trying to keep the function name as expressive as possible, so it tells the user what that function does. As opposed to like writing what the function does, try to use the function name. That's called like self-documenting. So if you have self-documenting functions, it's easier for somebody reading your code to know what's going on. If I just say directory, like what would that mean, right? But here I'm saying path to documents directory. or file path to documents directory with file name. And here we're supplying a string. We're supplying a string, and it also returns a URL. Let's rename that a little bit. 1 second. Path to file name. Path to documents directory. File name. Now, get file implies only getting, but I'm also reading to it. Path to documents directory. What's that? No. We'll keep this name for now. We'll refactor later. But for now, the path to documents directory will provide a file name. So obviously, the file name is that file name inside of the documents. Okay. So what are we doing here? Are we creating the path, or are we just? Good point. Are we creating it? We're not creating it. That's a very good question. Because this does not create anything. It just provides a URL. That's a very important question, right? It just returns us a URL. It's not writing or reading to anything. But if we want to write to it, we need that URL. Okay. If we need to read from it, we need that URL.
So this is just getting the URL.
Exactly. So it's maneuvering in and out. Question?
The file name that will provide already exists then?
We'll pass it a name.
Right, but you said
it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist yet. It does not exist. We'll be creating it in code in a different folder, in a different class. We haven't created anything yet. So when we're creating it, we'll be passing, if there's no objects, there's no file. The minute we have one object, a file will get created. And the file will get created not here, but it will get created in our persistence helper class. Very good. Yes, sir?
So is this going to create a path to the file name?
The file name, yes. So it will be documents/file name dot extension.
So it kind of takes the function get documents directory one step further.
Yes.
To the file itself.
Exactly. Very good. So what Greg is saying is it takes our earlier function, get documents directory, and it appends the file name to it. So at the end, the file name will be documents, or the path name will be documents/schedules.plist. Okay? The first one is only getting us, the first one here is only getting us documents. Right? We don't want to couple them together, because what if we want to write to a different file name? Everybody? Right? If I decouple it, so the first one only gets me documents directory. That's it. And the second one uses documents directory, and it appends some other file name to it. Very good. Let me be careful here. Let me just put return. I mean, I know Swift now is not mandatory that we put a return keyword here, but I'm just going to use return here so we know it's returning. Everybody? Right? It's returning the URL. But keep in mind, as of Swift 5, you do not need to explicitly have the return if you return in one statement. Second one here, we'll say return. In that case, we'll just say get documents directory. We'll simply use our function that we wrote earlier, but in this case, we'll be saying append. In this case, we'll be saying append path component. We'll be using append path component, not append path extension. Append a new component to that URL. Yes?
I'm asking because this is appended now.
Yeah, we're using append path component. So we have one path. The first path is documents/, correct? We add in a new component to it. The new component will be the file name.
No, because it's saying appending. It's the same thing, right?
Where am I? We're using appending, appending, okay? Appending path component, and it's expecting a string here, so we pass in file name. Great. So we have two pieces of information which is very vital to anything else we do from now on. We could get documents directory, we could pass a file name to documents directory, and read and write to that file name.
So at the end of these two, let's say we had a file and we gave it, a name, like, we put it in, let's say it's a text field, right? And the user is taking in their, making a file and they name it birthday or something like that. The next one where we do the path just makes it birthday.plist.
Yes. But not text field. It wouldn't be a text field. We start our application, anytime we say take Swift object,
It's the whole file.
take Swift object, convert it to data. On that data object, we say dot write. The dot write, it expects a URL. That's when it actually creates that URL. Sorry, that's when it actually creates that file. When we say write to.
But we haven't done.
We haven't done that. We haven't done any writing to anything yet. The only thing we've done so far is paths, like get paths, opened up our Finder.
Okay.
That's the only thing we've done. We haven't written anything to Finder. Yes.
Just to make sure I understand this correctly again, while we're not creating the plist here, this will be the URL file path that points to where we.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Good clarification there. So yes, we haven't created the plist, but this will use the plist that we create or pass to the file system. Again, we open up Finder. The only thing we've done with those two functions is open up Finder, and that's it. We haven't created, there's nothing in our documents right now. Everybody? We haven't explicitly written any data. The minute we say data.write, boom, we'll have our schedules.plist. If it exists, it will continue writing to it. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. Everybody?
So if it don't exist, you create and use access?
Yes.
If it exists, just use access?
Yes. If it exists, it will just write to it. If it doesn't exist, it will create and write. Okay? Again, it's like having a notes file or in here or whatever file you have in there. If it exists, you open, you edit. If it doesn't, you need to create it and edit. Very similar. Okay. Let's create a new folder or new group. Let's create a new group and call it data persistence. Call it data persistence and drag our FileManager extension in there. Awesome. So right now we'll just keep this file very simple. The functionality of it is an extension on our FileManager, and that's it. We don't want to add any more logic, any more code here. We'll go create a new file. So let's create a new file. It's a Swift file. Create it inside of your data persistence folder. Create a new file. We'll call it persistence. Let me open that up. We'll call it persistence helper. We'll call it persistence helper here. New file is called persistence helper. Okay. Great. We'll start off with a class here. We'll call it persistence helper. Again, our objectives will say we save. So save item, load. Let's start off with CRUD here. So CRUD. Create, read, update, delete. So first we'll be able to create or save. We'll be able to read or load. We want to update, we'll do delete. But keep in mind there's also update here. Okay, so load items. So if we save an item, we save an item to documents directory. If we read, we are loading items, load items or retrieve items. So load items or retrieve items from documents directory. Delete, remove item from documents directory. Great. So let's start off with the saving. So we'll start off with a function here. We'll call it save item.
It doesn't have to be static.
For now, we will use, let's see, static. For now, we'll make it static for now. But the item we're saving is an event. We'll make it static. We won't use a generic for now because we just learned generics. I don't want to put more new concepts on us here, but we will refactor this code. We'll refactor that code to work with any type. Because right now, we observe that it works with an event, only an event. Everybody with me? Okay? Let's keep it simple for now. And know that we'll come back, we'll refactor this. So save item. I'm not even gonna make this a singleton necessarily for now either, because later we'll use dependency injection as opposed to singleton here. But for now, just keep it simple. So we'll be able to save an item, and we have an array. We'll have an array of items here. So array of events, and we'll have it private. var events is an array of events. So we're saving all our items as an array, okay? Very similar to if you have a JSON API, you have an array of events in your JSON API. Here we'll be saving all the events as one, okay? So when the user creates a new event, we'll call this function, we'll pass in the event, we'll append the event to our events array. We'll append the event to our events array, and we'll use our events array along with what file? What file does the encoding?
Property list.
We'll use property list encoder. That's going to give us data, and then we'll say data.write to URL. A bunch of stuff happening here, but that's what we need to do. So let's write out the steps. And keep in mind, we'll refactor this persistence helper as we get better familiar with what documents and generics are, okay? Cool, so the first thing we're gonna do, we have an item. We need a URL to save the thing to. So get URL to save, get URL path to file event will be saved to. So get URL path to the file that the event will be saved to, right? So here we need a URL. Everybody? If I'm saving the events array, I need a URL so that I could access that file. We could get a URL. We have a URL. How do we get a URL? How do we get that, that URL of that file in the documents directory?
Is that like how it's before we data that's in that URL
You're looking at Web API. We're not doing guard, let, URL, endpoint. Yes, sir? Yes. So we're going to access FileManager. Very good. And we're going to use the path, the function we just wrote, path to documents directory. And here we'll supply the file name. FileManager, path to documents directory, or file path. I really want to, who's getting me the name for this? In my head, it works exactly correct here. So path to documents directory, and here we'll provide a file name. So let's take a second here and think of the file name.
I have a question. Do we need both of those, have both of those, type methods, but?
Which ones? Where am I?
Any extension with filing, do we need both of those methods, or? Do we
You could keep appending, or you keep,
I mean, like, my question is, would we ever just simply need to get the documents directory? Or could we have that as just like getting the path to the directory?
it could be private in reality. Like the documents directory one could be private, but the other one we need. Like that one here, for sure we need.
Yeah, no, I know we need this one, but I'm saying, could we just make it into one
Function, yeah.
Yeah, you could make it into one function.
and then we would never actually need the get
Yes, you could do that.
But
Um,
Stephanie, do we, just to mirror your other question, so the only reason why we create that function is so that we can call that function inside of the path?
It's a helper function, and I want to keep it separate here for now.
You want to use it?
Yeah, but yes, you could make it one function. Okay, next up, I want to get a file name, but here I can't just say schedules list everywhere. I'm not going to say this. Why is this bad? Right, like probably, right? I could misspell it like right now, right? Yes? Okay, so we don't want to do that. We'll take a break here. We'll stop here, and we'll go create some file name. So private var, or let rather. We're not going to change it. We'll call it file name. And here we'll supply some file name. So we said it's schedules.plist. And why plist? It's a property list file. Explicitly, it's very similar to saying .json or .swift, right? That extension here denotes it's a property list. So it's very similar to our info.plist. It's like a dictionary here of database data, very similar to our info.plist. Yes, Amini?
And so when we use properly encoder, like while it's being encoder, yeah, but it has to take that, it'll take that string and it'll separate it, it'll be able to see plist and
It doesn't separate it. It just knows, like, you see when you open up a file and your application cannot open up the file because it doesn't have there's no application that supports it.
okay.
A plist opens up as a info.plist file.
Okay.
So calling it something else would not render like a plist. Like I wouldn't be able to see the data because it's a different format.
It's okay,
Right?
format, so that's what I'm saying, that I identify the format information.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So when we go back to it, when we open it in the documents folder, Tiffany and class, right? When we open it up in the documents directory and we double click on it, it will open as if it's like an info plist. It's very similar. Yes, sir.
What if you don't add fields essentially?
What if you? Oh, you could have a different. It will still work, but you just won't have access to it like the info.plist.
Okay.
Okay. Good question. You could write to it, but you won't be able to see it visually like a plist. Okay, so that's good. So we have our URL. What else we need? We need to change this here to file name.
It's not lit enough.
Where am I? Oh, make it static. Sorry.
So why is that? How come?
Because this is a static. Statics works with statics. Yes, sir.
Select the file is telling me that instance number file cannot be used on type system.
Make sure your path to documents is a static type.
Yeah, I didn't put it as static, that's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
So get URL to file that the event will be saved to. Good. Next up. We have our events array. This is what we'll be using. So events array will be object being converted to data. So events array, like we said earlier, we'll take the events array and we'll convert it to a data object And then we'll use that data object. We will use the data object to write. We will use the data object to, we'll use the data object and write or save it to documents. Okay, so how do we do that? First off, we'll start with a do catch here, because it could throw, very similar to our JSON decoder and our JSON encoder. We expect data. Again, all our code is very similar to what we did with parsing JSON. So here we'll use, what class did we say we're going to use?
Protocol.
So property list, right?
Yeah, sorry.
So property list, encoder or decoder? Encoder, very good. And here we encode in. It needs to be conforming to encodable or codable, right? So if we say events here, events. What's the error we have here? Let's see. Instance member events cannot be used on type persistent helper. Reference instance is not encodable. Requires that event conform to encodable. Do we see that error? All right, let's go over to our model and see what's going on. So in our model, we have event. Event doesn't conform to anything right now. Do we see that? So let's update event to codable, because we'll be both writing and reading. That's why we say codable. Everybody with me? Okay, so here we have codable. Great, let's go back and build. Where am I? Instance, events, this guy is static. Okay. Again, we have everything static here just to keep this simple, but we will refactor this code to use dependency injection later, as we learn about what dependency injection is. Great. So here we have, we good. So we have data here. If we option click on data, we'll see it's a data type. So it's type data, very similar to we're about to post. Like, assuming we're about to post, this is very similar. The only difference is property list encoder as opposed to JSON encoder. But the syntax is identical. Okay, so we have our data. Now we want to go ahead and write that data. So on a data object, I have a function called write. Write means write to some URL. So on my data instance, I say write. I say write to. We have the URL, and for options, I could say atomic. Atomic basically means write everything at once. Okay? So for the options, it has an enum. I could simply say atomic. And this also throws. I need to mark it as a try. Okay. So that logic writes data to the documents directory. Line 24 gets the URL where I want to write to, right? Line 29 takes the property list encoder. It encodes my events objects to data. It converts all of them, or it serializes, right? Converts or serializes those objects to data, yes? I have the data object. On the data instance, I say, write to this URL.
What does atomic mean?
Atomic means write all the data at once. We're not waiting for anything. Write all at once. I think it might be doing it by default. In that case, we just wouldn't need any of that. And we could have an error. If we have an error, we will, yes?
Yeah, I have an error.
What is the error?
It says error to from here or not.
No, that's fine. Okay. So let us see something new again. I have this function here. It throws an error. I do not have a completion handler here. I need to let the user of this function know that something went wrong if something does go wrong. Everybody with me? Having a print statement here is not enough. Right? If I put a print statement here, that's not enough. The user of that function needs to know something went wrong. In our networking code, we had a completion handler saying completion with error or something like that. But here I could have an error. I want the user of my function to know that something went wrong. Right? This is what this provides. It provides us a mechanism using a throwing function to say something went wrong, so we need to mark it with a try. Everybody sees that. Right? So error handling as a developer is very important. You need to let the person using your API know that there was an error. Right? We could do it with a completion handler. In this case here, we'll do it using a throwing function. So the function itself will throw an error so that somebody implementing save knows that it could throw an error. They need to mark it with a do catch and a try. Everybody with me? Okay, so like we did with our network helper, we will create some enum here of data persistence error conforms to error. And here, for now, we'll just say this one is a saving error. Okay? So we say it's a saving error here. We could capture the error as well with an associated type, associated value. And it needs to conform to error here in that case. So this is conforming to error, conforming to the error protocol. Lowercase p, sir. Okay, yes, sir.
What's the name of those data that are
This guy?
error in FileManager? What kind of data? Like the built-in data.
Of,
There is data.
oh, the type is error. It's type error.
They don't have a specific name for those types that are stored?
It's an error type. Like there's an error protocol. That's what we have here. We have an error protocol, and now as a developer, we're saying the type error is a saving error. But yeah, there's a decoding error. What do you mean?
No, I get that. I was wondering if there was a specific name for it built-in.
There's built-in errors that's like on an array, you have like a built-in error that's out of bounds error, right? But in that particular error here, we have in our own type error, and we throw in our own error type. That conforms to error. That will capture one of the errors that were thrown. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, more or less. It's a very irrelevant question.
Right. There's no irrelevant question. We need.
It's not. Yeah, it's not at all it doesn't take anything away from the
There's different types of error built into Swift, and when those are thrown, it's excellent. Out of bounds, we know what's going on, right? A decoding error, we know what's going on, right? But in that particular error, we use our own error type, saying saving error. Something went wrong, saving, and then we capture the actual error there, and we could show what that error is. Maybe it is a decoding error too, or maybe it's you have no more space on your disk, right? There's also an error like that, like an I/O error, right? There's different types of errors there. So an I/O is like you're writing to disk, and there's no more space in your disk. Very good. Yeah, ask all the questions away, please. So here in our catch, so to make a function a throwing function, you need to mark the function explicitly throws. So this function will throw an error, so we need to say this function throws. So we mark our function as a throwing function by explicitly using the keyword throws. So our saving function throws an error, And in our catch block, we will throw our error type saving error. And in our catch block here, we'll say throw.
So we're basically catching what the error is and then throwing it back whenever this function is called.
If there's an error.
If there's
Yeah, exactly. So very similar to like how we did our do catch with the decoding. Whoever is using this save will mark it, and if something goes wrong, they'll get it in their catch block.
yeah, so I'm just saying it's going from here to whatever.
To here, yeah, exactly. Like you're propagating it back to the caller. Very good. So any question was like, yes, does it go back to the caller? Yes. So if the error is thrown here, we don't handle it here. We throw it to the person calling it, and the person calling it will be the one to handle it. In that case, we want the person that calling it to handle it, because that could be our view controller, and the view controller would show an alert out of disk or something like that.
Is it left on something that this error will show the user?
This error will be thrown back to the view controller, and in the view controller, we could have an alert showing the error. Yeah, just saying the user could not save. If it's for disk purposes, you'll say not enough space on your device. Yes, sir.
The save function takes in an event, but it doesn't do it.
It saves the events here. Oh, actually, we forgot to append. Thank you. So we'll append it to the array. Right now, we're appending an empty array. I mean, we're saving an empty array, but we need to append it to the events. Right, everybody? Pay attention here. So here, we need to append new event to the events array.
We don't do it in the do?
No, in the do, we only convert in the data.
Oh, and once it's inside of the events array is when we
Let's
want
just call this. Yeah, when we're actually converting it on line 36. That's why we're converting our array to data.
okay, gotcha.
But if you don't append, exactly. If you don't append the event, you'll always have an empty array. All right? A lot of moving parts here. So now we throw this data persistence error, and the error we throw in is a saving error, and we simply pass in error here. We want to go back to user defaults. Okay. Right, user defaults, one line, right? And here that's only saving. We haven't even retrieved yet. Cool. So we have information to save. We'll test it out. And we'll take a next break, because I really and truly, I'd rather go through this 2 days, 3 days than putting it all out there. So we'll save, and then we'll verify if it does save. And then we'll take a break after that. Everybody's good? Okay? All right. So we are good with our save function. Let's go to...
You got,
1 second. Go back here, you mean?
never mind.
You got it? No, take it. Because if you take it away, then she's not able to type, and then, right? So type what you have to type, and then I'll wait.
No, I'm trying to figure out why when I put in my cache, data persistence error, that's the error.
Antonio, can you take a look at Dan's computer, please? Thank you. Okay, so that's what we have to start thinking. So when the user clicks on the add button, they add an event to when they click on the add button, it takes them to a modal presentation, correct? In the modal presentation, they add an event or they create an event, they click on the create button, it segues out. When we append it to that array in our first view controller, that's where we'll do the saving part. Everybody with me? Okay? So that's one of the things like you have to think of where you want to save.
Where we add the event?
Yeah, where we add the events to the events array in the controller. Yeah, that's where we'll actually call that function. In the first view controller. The first view controller is where we append into the events array. There's no events array in the second view controller. I'll walk through it with us. Yes, sir.
Should we use the events variable in the schedulers controller?
Oh, you mean this guy?
Yeah.
No, this guy I want to keep it private. Yeah, I want to keep it private to the class here. Because also when we load in it, we don't want to couple the events, right? I don't want to couple it to the view controller. Because, what if we change the view controller? Yeah, that's good. How are we doing, guys? So, BNB was asking a good question there. He was saying, can we just use the events in the controller as opposed to creating one here? We do not want to couple our view controller code in any way to this class. That class, at the end of the day, at the end of next week, or midweek next week, that class needs to be as generic as possible, right? When I say generic, it should be able to work with any type that I want to save, okay? If I start coupling it to the view controller, that means now the view controller is tied to this class, and it's harder for us to remove them from each other. Everybody with me, right? So at the end of the day, next week we'll come in, we'll start refactoring. Event will not be event, it will be angle bracket type T. Type T will conform to quotable, right?
Are we doing the generics like the type T?
Yes, type T, and type T needs to conform to quotable.
So we can copy and paste, like this would be like a network card.
Yes,
So we can just copy and paste this code to do it again.
exactly. So as Christian says, it will be like a network helper where we're always using the same code, right? For now, it couples to event because we need to fundamentally know how to make this work on our own. So on our own lab, we'll still use like photo, whatever your model is. But yes, write it again. That way you get the muscle memory working there as opposed to copy pasting. But once you're comfortable with it, we'll change it to a generic.
Yeah, so it's just
Exactly. And once you're comfortable with that generic, you just import data persistence. Because I wrote that library already. Like that exists already. But for now, we're not going to use import data persistence, but we need to know how to write it. Cool? All right, great. Okay, so let's go to our schedule list controller. What does schedule list controller look like? So in schedule list controller, we have an add event function here. Do we see that? That add event function is coming from our unwind segue. So when we click on create event, it unwinds, it comes here, we capture the new event, we add it to the local events array. Everybody sees that? So here in that local events array, we have our, what's our event? We have our created event here. Our created event is coming from the created event controller. Everybody with me still? So here I could simply take in, I could actually just do this right here. So right here I could say persist or save event to documents directory right here.
Why wouldn't it be a good idea to have it we have other controllers.
What if something goes wrong before we get here? When we get here, we know for sure that we are here.
Well, wouldn't you want that notification so then to tell them that something went wrong while we're still saving?
The minute they click on create, it segues out. We have to refactor that if we want to do this. Right now, the way we have it set up, I click create event, it segues out. Right? If I want to stay on that view and tell them some dialog box, your thing was saved, that's fine. But we're not doing that right now. Cool? But yes, you could totally do that.
So that's like an opening option, is what I'm saying?
Yes, like for your Photos app, right? When you click a favorite, when you favorite something, you could keep them right there, you're not segueing out, and say photo was saved. Cool? Very good. Okay, so here we have persist save event. Whispers. How we doing? I hear whispers. Where are we? We in add new event. Where are we? We're right after the godlet here. We all should have the same line. We have the same code. We should be right around line 53. Yes? Okay, at this point, we have our persistent helper dot save event, and the event is created event. And as I said, it does throw, so we could mark it do catch here. And actually cut this out and sorry. Okay. So look at that. This line on line 55. Our function throws. This is no longer a built-in function. our function actually throws an error, so we need to mark it explicitly with a try. And if it does throw an error, we have the error now in the view controller. Okay? So you always want to pass your error to the view controller at the end of the day. A print statement in that class is not enough, because there's no way for the view controller to know something went wrong with a print statement. Everybody, this is very important. Right? Because at the end of the day, if you're working on an app like that for an employer or production, you don't want a print statement, the user does not see it. You're not going to submit it to an employer. But if you propagate means to pass down, right? So if you pass that error over to the view controller, you could do anything with the error. Okay? So here we have our error. Now we could just say print here, for example, but we could show an alert. Everybody with me? Because now I have what the error is. So here I could simply say error saving event with error and just pass in my error. Build, make sure we have no errors here. And we are ready to rock and roll. Okay. For now, we're only creating. There's more code we need to write later to load all the items back as events. But for now, we're just writing too. Everybody with me? So that we could see that file, that physical file in the documents folder. Okay? We're taking it a step at a time. So let's run the app. Let's run the app and.
Can you leave that print statement that we had before? So after we
Yes.
So after we say something, we could just run it again and see if it's.
We're in the same thought process there, same thought path. You see? So leave the print statement, don't take it out, so we go back and we see it, exactly. Cool, so let us rock and roll here. Put a breakpoint right at 55 so we could know exactly what's happening here. So put a breakpoint right at your try when it's trying to save. So let's go to create a new event. So I click on add here. I click on create new event here. I click on food, whatever. Return, don't forget to click return here, and click create. And we get to our breakpoint. We have no error here for now, great. Keep executing the code by clicking on the play button here, right? At this point, let us, as Tiffany said earlier, let's get back to our documents directory. 1 second, so command space, paste in, not this. Copy back the URL path you have in your folder, in your console. Copy the path you have in your console. Command space, Command V, press enter. And at this point, we all should have a schedule list file. Do we have that? Awesome. So now we could double click on it. Where did it go? Double click on it here. Let's zoom in here. And we have one item. So again, this is very similar to our plist file, our info.plist file. Everybody? Right? We named it extension plist because we want to see it as a plist. And here, if I click on the item, I see the date of the object, and I see the name of my event. Does everybody see that? Cool? So this is it. We are able to write to the documents directory here. And we have our file. Let me go back to the file. We have our file called schedulelist.plist. And where's that name coming from? That name is coming from our persistence helper class, where we explicitly said string literal schedules.plist. Everybody with me? Yes, you could have multiple objects if you have here. Maybe you have event, maybe you have whatever. You could have multiple files there. Everybody with me? Right? Cool. So
And we would take multiple files if we would take a change to like.
a different name.
Oh.
Yeah. Like you could have multiple objects, for example. If you have food, you have orders. Like if you have an orders array, you have a pending array, for example. You probably separate those like different objects.
And different, okay, so something like that you probably create, even if you have different files that you want certain things to save to you.
You could do that for ease of use. But don't get too complex, because if you start having relationships between objects, we'll talk about core data, where if you have, for example, you're managing a company, there's employers, there's managers, there's a president. I would not exactly model that with documents directory. I would take a step back and look at core data, which we'll talk about later in Unit 5. Cool? So when you start talking about relationships between objects, like an object-oriented graph way, that's core data. Okay? But for like favoriting like an object or something like that, documents directory is perfect for it. Okay? Perfect. Okay, so let's go back to the code. Any questions before we take our lunch break here? Any questions?
How would we access a specific item?
You have your array. You have your array. Remember, you have your array. This is going to be, at the end of the day, an array of events.
Yeah.
And then our view controller has an array of events. On our app, we have an array of events. Anything we do to that, as far as like persistence-wise, we accessing the schedules.plist for it.
Oh, so it's coming back as an array.
Yes. So when we come back from lunch, we'll have like a load items or load events function that loads everything as an array back into the code.
Could we get one specific thing? Reason? I don't know what you want.
We'll be saving an array, so as long as we have our array, we could access whatever we want like we've always been doing.
So it would be like by index.
Yeah, exactly. When we delete, we'll be deleting by indexing. Our delete function will look something very similar to this. So we, in our persistence helper, we'll have a delete function that will be, the signature will be something like this. Delete, it will be very similar to like deleting an array item. Delete event or delete event at index, something like that, where it is some int. And then it would be, first remove it from the array. So it would be events that remove at index. And then once we remove, anything we do with the array, we save. After we've done with the manipulating of the array, we would save save that array to documents. Cool? All right, yes sir?
I don't know what I didn't get to see.
No, that's fine. You're not, no, we could go back for it. Okay, let's go back to save here. So, we have a function called save. The functionality of save is to save an item to that documents directory. And the way we save that item to documents directory is using the events array. The events array is the thing getting saved to the documents directory. Everybody. Events array on line 35, that's the thing that's getting saved to the documents directory. Yes? So far, so good? Christian?
It did eventually add to the right, I think that's
But can we talk about the function first?
yeah.
Okay. So here we have a save function. It takes in an event, and that event is coming back from our schedule list controller, correct? So we have an event. We created an event. Mine was called food. First, before we save anything, we need to get the URL of where we're saving the thing to. Luba? Right? We need to get the URL of where we're saving the thing to. We have the URL. We need a file name. Right? What's that file name? I cannot save something if I don't know what file it is. So we have a file name here called schedules.plist. We pass in the file name. Now we get back a URL from the function that we wrote on FileManager, the extension. Great. Next up, don't forget to add the event to the events array. You don't do that, your events array will always be empty. So append the event that you got into your from your function into the events array. Great. At this point, we have an events array that we want to persist. We want to take that events array and save it to the documents directory. We wrap our code in a do catch because we are dealing with the property list encoder. It could throw an error. What we're trying to encode? We're trying to encode the array of events. Everything inside that array needs to be a property list. It needs to conform, in that case, to encodable. We made it conform to codable because later we'll be retrieving. So, an event needs to conform to codable. We convert. Did we say anything about converting? convert or serialize the events array to data. So we take the events array, we serialize it, or we convert it to data. So we take all that whole line is, the only function of that line is to take my events array, convert it to data. Okay? Line 39 now takes the data, it writes the objects to documents directory. So this particular line here, writes the data to the documents directory. So writes, saves, persist the data to the documents directory. So those are the steps there. We could actually step them up. So step 1, those are mandatory steps, by the way. Step 2, I'll say step 3. I'll say step 4. Great. And lastly, step 5, if something goes wrong, we throw an error. And step 5, we throw an error using one of our enum cases. Yes, Mr. Matt?
So each time we write, each time we use the save function, we're writing an individual event, right?
Yeah.
So why do we set it up so that way it's an array of events when every time we run this function it's showing up one item?
Every time we run that function, every time we call save, it appends to the array and it saves it.
Yeah, but I'm saying like when we press save, are those new saved items going to appear in the static array of its events?
Yes. Yes. Because that's not the function we'll be using to retrieve. We'll be using like a load items to retrieve. But when we come back, we'll refactor that function to have like only a save part of it. Like for example, we'll probably take this bottom part out here and have like a save only function. Does that make sense? So it only saves. Let's see, maybe we could do it right now. So it would be, so append it and then call save. Everybody, I'm hearing a lot of whispers. Let's stay focused here. Actually, I'll do it after because there's more. That's just going to take more time because we need to throw on the save as well.
So now we don't see the reload.
Yeah, we're not going to see it when we reload because exactly, we haven't done the load yet. So when we come back, we will do a load. When we come back, we'll do a load function or load, call it like load events, something like that. That returns like an array of events. When we come back, we'll write that function. Okay? There's more when we come back, but I don't want to do everything at once. Right? The first step we did was get documents directory. Second thing we did was save an item. Okay? Okay, everybody. When we come back, we will load what we've saved. So the first thing we do when we come back is load what we saved. And at that point, we could add, because that works. And then the last thing we'll do is delete. Everybody with me? Okay? Awesome. Thank you. So let's stop here. Any questions before we stop? Christian, are you good with overview there? Okay, perfect. Thank you.